In today's video, we will be ranking Elden Ring's main bosses from really easy up to almost impossible to beat. And keep in mind that what you're currently watching is coming from a person's experience whose skill in Elden Ring and other Souls games lacks quality.
You're trash, Brock.
I'm not the best at Elden Ring, but I finished the game once, currently on my second playthrough, and I'm still having a blast with it. So I thought, why not make an Elden Ring boss tier list? Quick disclaimer before we get into it, this video will only contain main bosses, plus some optional bosses like massive bosses that everybody knows like Malenia and maybe a few others. And in other words, keep in mind that this tier list is literally how I experienced Elden Ring. You have may experience it differently, which is totally fine, that's the magic of this game. But I'm really curious to hear what you guys have to say as well, so let me know in the comments down below what was the hardest boss for you in Elden Ring, what was the easiest boss. I'll be replying to every comment, quote me on this. With that being said, grab some snacks, lay back, and let's get into this. Okay, so to kick it off, we're gonna start with the first boss you have to fight in Elden Ring, and that is Margit the Fell Omen. We have our empty list over here full of bosses, and to be fully honest with you, when I first fought Margit, I did not expect him to be that tough. You can laugh at me all you want, but imagine like being in a position where you literally just started the game, you take a few steps to that castle and reach the boss, you don't know how to farm rooms yet, you don't know how to level up, so you have a very small health bar, and your first boss is Margit, who's a boss that has very tough moves and attacks to dodge, especially if you're new at Souls games and Elden Ring, like I was. And not to mention the amount of damage he's gonna do to you, so that's why I would put Margit on a medium. I just feel like for a first boss, it really tests your skills, if that makes sense. Not all of your skills, but most of your skills as a true beginner in Elden Ring. Maybe for like Souls game veterans, Margit is like no problem, but for me it was a pretty decent challenge. I really enjoyed it, but there's way more difficult bosses to come. Alright, so next up on our list comes Godric the Grafted. And to be fully honest with you, Godric is not that far from Margit in my opinion, but at the same time there's a bunch of differences that in my personal experience made Godric a more challenging boss. Well, first of all, that second phase caused me some trouble, and by some trouble I mean a lot. Technically speaking, Godric is the first boss that has actually two phases, right? I mean, Margit has two phases as well, but you all know how like first phase you fight it, you win, then like you encounter him later on. You know what I'm talking about, we'll get there. Boy, if you don't. But Godric is like a first boss with two actual phases right then and there. And that second phase is what really got me. Learning how to dodge the fire and all of that took me a hot minute. Yes, it was harder than Margit, but I think it still goes on a medium. I wasn't even looking at hard at this boss, if you want me to be honest. I knew right away it was gonna be medium, and for many reasons. One of which is, yes, it's a more difficult boss because it's a bit later on in the game, but for me that meant I had more time to level up and get more runes, which also worked out perfectly. And if we were maybe to take Godric alone, it maybe went too hard, but considering that we still have more bosses to go through, I am comfortable with putting Margit and Godric at medium.
I'm gonna have to go ahead and sort of disagree with you there.
Next up on our list comes the third boss in Elden Ring, and I'm not even gonna like stay a lot at this. I don't even know if you could call this a boss. The Red Wolf of Radagon. It's a main boss, of course, and it's a joke of a boss. That's how easy this boss is. Even like being early on in the game and players are absolutely obliterating this wolf or massive dog or whatever it is, I think they added this boss just to make players more confident in their skills, you know, because like after Godric you need a little boost in your morale, in your confidence, right? But don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's a joke of a boss because it's bad. I absolutely loved the boss fight. It was amazing, it was really satisfying. I loved fighting a wolf. And the wolf looked really cool too, but I just don't see how anybody would find this boss challenging. Unless you like haven't spent any time getting some runes or leveling up, maybe you'd find it challenging, but even then, this boss takes a ton amount of damage. So for me, the Red Wolf of Radagon goes to the no problem section because I had no problem in beating it. Next up on our list is Rennala, Queen of the Full Moon, and I'm gonna say it right off the bat, this was not a tough boss fight either, not as tough as I expected it to be. When you figure out what you have to do, her first phase is pretty damn easy, you just have to get rid of the children holding books and throwing books at you, and then she'll like fall down and you can easily get past the first phase. The more problematic phase I had was the second one, where she starts using her staff and she basically summons all of them dragons and giants and spirits spirits and all of that. But even if the second phase is harder, as long as you get close to her, you will be good. Her attacks literally get cancelled almost every time you get close and attack. And personally, I was doing a lot of damage to her. I don't know, I don't remember what level I was, but I was doing pretty decent damage. So this is definitely a bit more challenging than the wolf, so it's going to the easy section.
Are you sure about that?
Okay, so the next boss on our list here is Godfrey, the first Elden Lord, but we gotta keep in mind this is Godfrey in his golden shade / spirit phase, which means he's a lot more weaker and doesn't have as many moves. And that is actually the case because Godfrey in this stage is not tough to beat at all. The boss is big, it's intimidating, the moves he does, the attacks are fairly slow. I actually forgot about this boss when I started this video, and I had to rewatch some of the old clips to remember what this boss is about. And you know what they say, when you don't remember a boss, that means it doesn't have a lot of things to be remembered for, because it wasn't that tough. But overall, Godfrey the Elden Lord in like this spiritual yellow phase is going to be neighbors with Rennala and going into the easy section. Okay, so I don't know if y'all are aware of what boss comes next, but that is Morgott the Omen King. We're starting to enter dangerous territory here, guys. Why do you ask? Well, for me, Morgott was pure pain and suffering. I don't know how about y'all, but Morgott was not an easy boss. Probably the most difficult boss at this point of the game, in my personal opinion. Imagine Margit, but 10 times more difficult. He's got that big, long, rainbow-looking sword that reaches everything and everywhere.
What did he say?
And a lot more moves that do a lot more damage. And speaking of damage, he takes a lot less too. And he's also a lot faster. The moves are unpredictable. Just like Margit, he's got unpredictable moves that are really hard to dodge, but you just gotta time them perfectly. All I'm gonna say is it took me a really long time to beat Morgott without summons. It was fun, I raged a lot, but it's not an easy boss. This boss deserves to be put on the hard section of our tier list. I think that's fair to say, at least for me. As I said, this is purely my experience with the game. Let me know how Morgott was for you, since we're slowly getting into the difficult bosses here. I feel like Morgott is sort of like the opening page of difficult bosses, because the next one's even worse for me. I'm actually thinking of putting Morgott at really tough, but thinking about what comes next, I think I'll just leave Morgott at hard. Next up on our list, we have a boss that has literally caused me pain for so long, and I've had nightmares, and I still have nightmares with this boss. The Fire Giant, ladies and gentlemen. This is probably one of the toughest bosses I have ever faced in Elden Ring. It's also known as the boss with one of the biggest HP bars in the game, besides Rykard, which we will get to later on. But the Fire Giant is a nasty mofo. It took us probably close to a whole week to beat the Fire Giant, and I'm not even joking when I say a week, as I'm terrible at dodging. His big massive attacks always got me. You'd think that if he's big he moves slow. He does move slow, but not as slow as I wanted him to, or at least as I expected him to. And I absolutely hated the fire, dude. I would always die to the fire. That second phase was hell. So that's why the Fire Giant is gonna go in at the really tough section. I was really almost putting this boss at impossible to beat, but there are some other bosses that literally almost made me punch my damn monitor. So we'll leave the Fire Giant at really tough. I think that's pretty accurate. The next boss we have to go through, or bosses more specifically, is the Godskin Duo. Now look, me particularly, I wasn't the biggest fan of this boss fight. First of all, it's not as easy as somebody like Godric or Margit, but at the same time it's not as difficult of a boss as the Fire Giant, so it is automatically going to go at hard, right near Morgott the Omen King. Now why is that? First of all, I got my butt kicked a lot of times, because it was the first 2v1 fight in the game. I know there's many more 2v1 fights in the game. I think there's also a 3v1 fight, if I'm not mistaken. But the point is, I got my butt kicked, especially from that fat dude. The skinny one wasn't a big problem for me. The fat one with his big sword was the one that I kept dying to, and that's why I used summons with this boss fight. I'm gonna keep it a full stack with you guys.
This is trash.
I did use a summon and it helped a lot. Something else I used after I got my butt kicked many times are sleeping arrows and sleeping pots. But generally speaking, the Godskin Duo is going to go right near Morgott the Omen King at the hard section. Now the next boss that we're gonna go through real fast, because I don't wanna make this a 30-minute video, is Maliketh the Black Blade. And Maliketh is pure insanity. At least that was the case for me. The speed of his attacks and his moves are simply nuts. To this day, I still believe that I can't beat Maliketh alone. I think that y'all already understood that I did like get in randoms to help me with Maliketh, because there was simply no possible way I was gonna be able to beat this boss. Trust me, I tried, but it was just not possible. The first phase I managed to get around it, but the second phase was just too much for me to handle all by myself. So I did get one other dude to help me, and in a few tries we managed to beat Maliketh. But Maliketh is 100% going to be the first boss on our list to go to the almost impossible section. Keep in mind, this is all based on my experience, but if you're somebody who finds this boss easy, please let me know and let's get some games in. Alright, so this next boss we have coming up is literally a piece of cake after the Maliketh fight. The boss is called Sir Gideon or Gideon Ofnir the All-Knowing, and this guy is literally kind of a joke, because personally I beat him in a few hits. I don't know, he was like talking all this crap and I literally came up and like hit him a few times with my Rivers of Blood and he was out. But yeah, it's a mandatory fight. It was very easy for me. Let me know how it was for you. Maybe I'm mistaken, but it literally took me like 4 hits to beat this guy. He didn't even have time to attack, so that's that. So obviously we'll be putting him at the no problem section right near the Red Wolf. The next boss, one of the final bosses in Elden Ring, also for me is one of, if not the most difficult boss in Elden Ring, and that is Godfrey the First Elden Lord. Also Godfrey in not the Golden Shade form, but in his actual form. And let me tell you that Godfrey in this form was a massive problem for me. Oh, and it literally lives up to the name of our list, almost impossible to beat, because that is exactly where I'm putting it.
This don't miss.
No, he's good.
That motherfucker don't miss, man.
He's good.
In the heat of battle, he don't miss.
This boss fight was crazy, all around. The first phase was nuts, I said nuts previously, but it was crazy. All the stuff he does, all of his attacks are kind of like those delayed attacks where like he doesn't attack, then you dodge right away for the second attack, but he like takes like a 1 millisecond break and you still get hit. It's very annoying. And I'm not even gonna mention his second phase where he literally can start grabbing you. Godfrey himself is so big and intimidating and you're like that small little guy. It was really hard for me to concentrate and focus. It took me an eternity, quite literally, to beat him. All jokes aside though, I loved the fight. It was so much fun. It was challenging, but I absolutely had a blast with it. And the last main boss fight in Elden Ring. We all know it, we all love it. I certainly did love it. Radagon of the Golden Order and the Elden Beast. There's a reason why they made this boss fight the last one in the game, because in terms of difficulty, it's up there. It's arguably the hardest boss fight in Elden Ring for me. Yes, way harder than Malenia. We haven't reached her yet. She comes after this, but I'm gonna say this right now. Radagon for me was so much more challenging than Malenia. Not even the Elden Beast. Radagon himself took us a long time to beat. First of all, yes, he's pretty easy to stagger, but he's immune to a lot of stuff. I think he's immune to blood, isn't he? I don't quite remember, but I knew he like dealing a lot of damage to him through blood or stuff like that wasn't working, but he did get staggered, so we did have to switch our builds. And if we talk about the Elden Beast here, that's a whole nother boss, dude. And the fact that I had like to beat Radagon, then beat Elden Beast, and if I die to the Elden Beast, I have to beat Radagon again to reach the Elden Beast, was pain. Massive pain. Although we did eventually beat it with no summons. I don't think you can summon at this fight. Let me know in the comments down below. I don't remember, honestly. Radagon is probably my favorite fight in the game. It was the most challenging fight. Radagon and Godfrey in his final form are probably like the top 2 most difficult fights of this game. Absolutely love them both. I don't know who'd be harder. I think in some aspects Elden Beast and Radagon win, and in other aspects Godfrey wins. But overall speaking, we will be putting Radagon and the Elden Beast up to the almost impossible to beat section in our tier list, for obvious reasons. And the last two bosses I wanted to talk about real fast in this video are the optional bosses and like two of my favorite optional bosses in Elden Ring. That is Malenia and Rykard. And of course we can't forget about Radahn, which I even forgot it was an optional boss because literally everybody does it. Radahn is pain. Radahn is one of those bosses in my case that is neck and neck with Fire Giant regarding difficulty. Maybe Radahn does not have that chunky of a health bar like the Fire Giant, but it is still a big health bar for me, and it took me a long time to beat it. And shout out to those AIs you can summon mid-fight during Radahn. They really help out a ton and cause a good distraction. But even with that, man, because of Radahn's weird purple electricity, and because he's a big chunky boy that when he hits you, you feel it, he is overall going to the really tough section. So looks like the Fire Giant's going to have a body now. Malenia is known as the hardest quote-unquote Elden Ring boss fight. And I don't like wanna sound different or anything like that. Personally, I did not have much trouble with Malenia. Yes, every hit that she does heals herself. Yes, she has that like insane anime looking like sword attack that basically almost every time got me. Back when I did my first playthrough and you had a blood build and the rivers of blood that wasn't nerfed, Malenia wasn't that big of a trouble. I think I took like about 7-8 tries, definitely below than 10 tries with her.
So that was a lie.
Overall, we're definitely gonna put Malenia at a really tough because it's obviously way harder than the Godskin and Morgott, but it's not as hard as something like Radagon or as something like Godfrey in his final form. And speaking of Rykard, the only reason I actually fought Rykard was to get the Blasphemous Blade, which you've seen being shown in the background gameplay. And to be honest, Rykard was pain, massive pain. The reason I put it at hard is because you get a special weapon when entering this boss fight, and there's a few cheeses with that weapon where you can literally like keep spamming it and he will like won't have time to attack you in between. And not to mention that I did use summons, call me bad, I did use some help with this and we took it down pretty fast. With that being said, we have finally reached the end of today's video. I want you all to take a look at the beautiful tier list of Elden Ring bosses we have built together.
Oh my god! Wow!
Let me know in the comments below what's your thoughts on this, and if you did enjoy it, feel free to drop a like. If you're new here and want to keep in touch with us on the content, make sure to subscribe. Feel free to drop by our streams every Saturdays and Sundays here on YouTube as well. Take care of yourselves. See you in the next one. Peace.